There's a story that Rav Amital, Zichron Bracha, would tell about the day that a group of Catholic priests came to visit him in Yeshivat Har Etzion. They arrived right before Tfilat Mincha, and Rav Amital had to think fast about what to do with them until they finished davening. But then he had a brainstorm. He sent them up to a place which is empty in Yeshiva during the week, the Ezrat Nashim. And the priest stood there above looking at Tfilat Mincha. And as you know, Tfilat Mincha looks very impressive in Yeshiva, because during the silent Shmoneh Esrei, everybody's standing in their place, nobody's talking, and the room is filled with silence. And the priest came down the stairs, and they went to Rav Amital, and there was only one issue that they wanted to discuss with him. How do you, the Jews, manage to overcome the problem of stray thoughts during prayer? And Rav Amital chose to teach them, to tell them the bitter truth by telling them a story. Once upon a time, the students of the Baal Shem Tov approached him and told him that they say that there's a miracle worker who is in a neighboring town. How can we know, is this guy for real or is he a fake? And the Baal Shem Tov told them, ask him if he has a solution for the problem of stray thoughts during prayer. If he says he has a solution, it shows that he's a fake. Many of the reasons why it's so difficult to have intent, kavanah, during prayer is because the words of prayer that we say each day, we're saying the same words over again and again, words that are not our words, but words written by other people, and words that have to be said at set times, whether or not it's appropriate for us. Prayer wasn't always that way, and I'd like to begin the shiur by looking at that point in time that the world of prayer was forever changed, the day that prayer became a fixed phenomena. And this takes us to the fourth chapter of Brachot, the Mishna Gimel. Rabban Gamliel Omer, Bikol Yom Mitpalel Adam Shmoneh Esrei. Every day, we must all pray Shmoneh Esrei. And many believe, based both on the Agadata that appears in Masechet Tanit and a lot of extensive historical information, that before the Tefillah Shmoneh Esrei was established, there was not any fixed prayer in Am Yisrael. People would pray at times that people in a format at times that responded to their needs and desires. And Rabban Gamliel is in fact making a revolution in the history of prayer. Now, why is it Rabban Gamliel who's making this change? Rabban Gamliel is the leader of Am Yisrael. He's the Nasi, and he's living during the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And as a leader, he realizes, yes, that he must take responsibility for the destiny of Am Yisrael. The center, the Mikdash, is no longer standing. The Jewish people are being scattered throughout the world, and we need something to keep us all together. And by having a set tefillah, this allows all the Jews, wherever they are, in whatever times, to be united with a united vision about what we're praying for, what we're trying to aspire to. And in that sense, Rabban Gamliel's takana was a tremendous success. Jews in Israel live in Israel from more than 100 countries, and one of the factors that all unite us is we're all mitpalel the same Shmoneh Esrei. However, everything has its price. And not surprisingly, Rabban Gamliel's brother-in-law, Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, comes out against this step by Rabban Gamliel. In Mishnah Daled begins, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Hoseh tfilato keva, ein tfilato tachanunim. Based according to the Yerushalmi, Rabbi Eliezer is disagreeing with Rabban Gamliel. The Yerushalmi tells us that every day Rabbi Eliezer would pray a different prayer. And he's telling Rabbi Gamliel, you're not saving prayer, you're destroying it. Because the essence of prayer is tachanunim, beseeching. By making prayer into a fixed, formal phenomena, you're ultimately destroying prayer. And I said earlier, it's not surprising that Rabbi Eliezer is the figure that comes out against Rabban Gamliel, because we know about Rabbi Eliezer's individualism from the famous story in Baba Metzia that he chose to spend the rest of his days in excommunicated and not accept majority rule in a case that he felt that the ultimate truth was his opinion, which was in the minority. And what's fascinating about the Mishnah is that and something which I think we take for granted, is that the Mishnah doesn't only bring down the view which is ultimately accepted, but the Mishnah brings down a variety of different views, and one of the reasons for that factor is because of the belief that there's value and truth in each of this of differing statements. We may ultimately choose one approach on a practical level, but we believe that there's truth underlying both approaches. So here, Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer, both of them are presenting very significant and authentic values. We know in the Gemara it talks about two sources for tefillah. Are tefillot paralleling the tefillot of the avot, or tefillot paralleling the avodah of karbanot in the Beit HaMikdash? And this is really the two different approaches that we have of Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Gamliel sees prayer as a fixed, more formal phenomena, and in that way similar to the avodah of the Beit HaMikdash, whose power was that this was every day consistently bringing the karbanot. However, the tefillot of the avot, our avot, they prayed facing real-life challenging situations, and every prayer was unique. And this is Rabbi Eliezer's approach to tefillah, that sees the essence of tefillah as being tachanunim. But what's so fascinating, and I think something which can be demonstrated in the context of this chapter, that when there are different opinions mentioned, not only is one triumphant and the other one rejected, but often we could see that elements of even the rejected opinion ultimately are incorporated within the halacha. And we'll see that the structure of the fourth parak of Brachot incorporates both of these values, the value of tefillat keva, of the fixed tefillah, but also the value of a spontaneous personal tefillah. Let's go back and see the first Mishnah of the parak that deals with the time of tefillah. Tfilat hashachar ad chatzot. Rabbi Yehuda omer ad arba shaot. Tfilat hamincha ad erev. Rabbi Yehuda omer ad plag hamincha. Tfilat ha'erev ein la keva. V'shamusafim kol hayom. Rabbi Yehuda omer ad sheva shaot. There are four prayers mentioned in the first Mishnah: Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit, and Musaf. Three of them, they're debates. One of them, there's no debate. Three of them have set times, but one of them, that same one that there's no debate, tells us Tfilat Erev Ein La Keva. There is no Keva. Now, presumably, you can't pray Arvit in the middle of the day, so presumably Tfilat Arvit is the entire night. Now, why did the Mishnah choose to say Tfilat Arvit Ein La Keva instead of simply saying that Tfilat Arvit kol halayla. The same way it said, v'shel musafim kol hayom. Now, here I believe the Mishnah is making a word play to tell us a message. We could think that Tfilat Arvit is a second-rate tefillah. There are those tefillah that have set times, and you have a tefillah that doesn't have a set time, so it's less important. Or as the Bavli says, Tfilat Arvit is Reshut. We are obligated to daven Shachrit Mincha, and Tfilat Arvit is optional. That might be a second reason to think that Arvit is a second-rate tefillah, less significant. But by choosing the word Ein La Keva instead of saying Kol Halayla, the Mishnah teaches us that Arvit is not less, but it's different. Because the word Keva is mentioned twice in the fourth parak. Rabbi Eliezer used the word Keva by saying, Hosed Tfilato Keva Ein Tfilato Tachanunim. By Rabbi Eliezer teaches us that Tfilat Keva is not such a great thing. Tfilat Keva is in many ways defeats the idea of prayer. So therefore, when the Mishnah says Tfilat Arvit Ein La Keva, it's not denigrating Tfilat Arvit, but rather showing that Arvit is reflective of the value that sees Rabbi Eliezer as being the essence of prayer, the lack of Keva. So in that context, it's understandable why there's no set time for Ma'ariv. You're mitpalel Ma'ariv when it's appropriate for you. And also, even more so, the approach of the Bavli, that Tfilat Arvit is Reshut. You're not obligated, but lack of obligation is to allow you to choose whether to daven Ma'ariv or not. Now, so if we go back to Mishnah Gimel, we can see yet another way of finding the middle ground between Keva, formality, and spontaneity. After Rabban Gamliel makes a statement, B'kol yom mitpalel adam shmona esrei, Rabbi Yeshua omer me'ein shmona esrei, Rabbi Akiva omer im shagura tfilato bepiv yitpalel shmona esrei, v'im lav me'ein shmona esrei. We have a debate in the Mishnah. According to Rabbi Yeshua, shmona esrei, l'chatchila, we should not be saying shmona esrei, but something called me'ein shmona esrei. Rabbi Akiva believes that b'di'evid, if you're unable to say shmona esrei, you could say me'ein shmona esrei, but l'chatchila we should be saying shmona esrei. Now, what is me'ein shmona esrei? There's a debate in the Gemara. Shmuel says that me'ein shmona esrei is a short tefillah, havinenu. It's a short tefillah that takes two words from each of the different brachot of shmona esrei. Whereas Rav says that me'ein shmona esrei is me'ein kol bracha ubracha, me'inyan of each bracha. Now, to Shmuel's opinion, I could see appropriate to Rabbi Akiva that sees me'ein shmona esrei as a b'di'evid. But according to Rabbi Yeshua, that the l'chatchila, the ideal tefillah, is me'ein shmona esrei, I find it hard to accept that havinenu is the ideal shmona esrei. Therefore, I think that according to Rabbi Yeshua, the meaning of me'ein shmona esrei is the way that Rav explains it. And what does it mean? Minyan kol bracha ubracha. It means that there are 18 topics. However, what to say about each one of these 18 topics is, or at least the what's called the bekashot, the 13 in between brachot. We don't use a fixed terminology for the different topics. Rather, each person, in his own words, in his own language, talks and is mitpalel to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about each of the 18 topics. Now, I believe that Rabbi Yeshua is giving us a brilliant solution to the tension between spontaneous and formal tefillah. We know that there are three types of people that go to lectures. There are those that have every word written out, and likely as not, their lecture is going to be have a very dry, artificial feeling when they read from word from whatever they've written. You have people say, well, I'll be spontaneous, but unless they're very talented, there are going to be a lot of digressions and a lot of disorder. A good lecturer, before he goes, he makes a list of the topics and points he wants to relate to, and he leaves it to his adrenaline to successfully present the different points that he wanted to raise. That's what I believe Me'ein Shmoneh Esrei is about. The 18 topics are giving us the essential topics that we should be talking about in our tefillot to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, what to say about each topic, instead of following a fixed text which would leave us feeling distant and artificial about what we're saying, each person says what he chooses to say relating to that particular bracha. Now, you may say that this is a possibility that's no longer relevant because clearly we paskin like Rabbi Gamliel. However, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah paskins, and this is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, that relating to each of the 13 Bekashot, before concluding the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, you are allowed to add in your words what you choose to say relating to the topic of that bracha. In this way, we could add a personal dimension to the Shmoneh Esrei. The first words of every bracha guides us to what the topic is. Then we could add a few of our own words about that topic. They don't have to be profound, but the very fact that they're our own words can help us link up to the tefillah. And therefore, even within halacha, there is a place for Rabbi Yeshua and ultimately for Rabbi Eliezer about the spontaneous tefillah. Let's take a look at one more Mishnah that again shows us the middle road between the fixed and spontaneous prayer. And that's Mishnah Bet. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, היה מתפלל בכניסתו לבית מדרש וביציאתו תפילה קצרה. אמרו לו, מה מקום לתפילה זו? אמר להם, בכניסתי אני מתפלל שלא תארע תקלה על ידי, וביציאתי אני נותן הודיה אל חלקי. Rav Nechunya ben Akana composed his own personal tefillah. Now, what's very surprising about the Mishnah is the place of this Mishnah. Mishnah Aleph talks about the time for Tfilat Shmoneh Esrei. Mishnah Gimel talks about the text of Tfilat Shmoneh Esrei. It's very striking that these two Mishnayot that are so naturally connected are divided by this Mishnah that tells us about this nice prayer that Nechunya ben Akana composed for himself. But why is this splitting the continuity of talking about Shmoneh Esrei? And if at all the Mishnah should mention this detail of Tefillah, it should be mentioned somewhere at the end of the chapter. But I think this is exactly the point. The point is to teach us that personal prayer is significant. The structure of this chapter, Mishnah Aleph talks about formal prayer. Mishnah Bet talks about personal prayer. Mishnah Gimel, Rabban Gamliel brought us back to formal prayer, whereas Mishnah Daled brought us to Rabbi Eliezer, and there and also the following part talks about a more spontaneous tefillah relating to unique situations. Now this idea actually appears in the Gemara in Mishna Brachot, Daf Yutet and Aleph, tells us about many Rabbanim that composed their own tefillah that they would say at the end of Shmoneh Esrei. One of them we all say, Elokai Netzor L'Shoni Mira, is not part of Shmoneh Esrei. It's a personal tefillah written by one of those Rabbanim that ultimately was incorporated in Shmoneh Esrei. But I believe what this Gemara should be teaching us is not that to say the prayers that these Rabbanim were saying, but rather to teach us we should all come up with our own tefillah. And what that means is not day in, day out come up with a new tefillah, but sitting down and thinking, what tefillah most touches on the essential points that I would like to raise in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu when I am mitpalel in front of Him. And just like we don't change so drastically from day to day, this tefillah doesn't have to change from day to day. We should compose a tefillah expressing what we feel now, and as we grow and change, slowly this tefillah will change with us. So in a nutshell, we find 3 approaches within this parak about finding the personal aspect of tefillah. First, in Arvit, the text is fixed, but the choice and time are left to us. The concept of me'ein shmona esrei, which ultimately allows us to add our own words within each of the bekashot, and the call for each of us to discover what is ultimately our tefillah. I'd like to bring 2 anecdotes to express this idea that the fixed words of tefillah could have unique personal meaning for each of us. The first sad, and the second one something happy. After the terrorist attack that was in the yeshiva, there was a memorial in which one of the students who had been very badly injured came over to share an insight he had relating to the words Mechayeh HaMeitim. He pointed out that the words Mechayeh HaMeitim are in the present form. And it's not God will lead to the resurrection of the dead, but Mechayeh HaMeitim, that in the present there is the phenomena of Tchiyat HaMeitim. And he asked, where do we find Tchiyat HaMeitim in the present? And he answered that he was told by somebody who goes around visiting people in hospitals who have been injured in different terrorist attacks to give them chizuk. The person said sometimes people feel that they're totally destroyed physically, emotionally, spiritually, and somehow, despite their feelings that it's all over for them, they manage to come back to the gifts of life. And that's what Mechayeh HaMeitim means in the present. A few minutes later, Yossi Apter, the father of Noam Apter, one of the 4 students killed in the attack, came over to me and told me that he has an interesting thought relating to the word Mechayeh HaMeitim. And he too began with the same question that the previous student, Asaf Fassi, raised, that Mechayeh HaMeitim is used in the present form and not the future. And on one hand, I was sure he'd give me the same answer that I heard a few minutes before from Asaf. However, on the other hand, right away I thought to myself that this wouldn't be appropriate, because as opposed to Asaf, who was zochet to live and achieve a refuah, Yossi's son, Noam, did not survive the attack. But then Yossi comes and says, you know what Mechayeh HaMeitim is about in the present? Somebody dies, but by taking this person's good work and remembering him l'tova, and doing good things in his name, and trying to do things which he would have done, by doing that we give this person a presence within the present, and that's what Mechayeh HaMeitim is about in the present. So 2 people relating to the same 2 words with the same question, each gave a different meaning to these words based on their life situation. Now, but then was something happy. When my daughter Nama was born, the baby came out, she's still purple, and my wife turns to me and says, you know what? Now I know what Tfilat Asher Yatzar is talking about. Tfilah says, Asher Yatzar et Adam b'chachma, creating man with wisdom, is talking about giving birth, because the rest of the prayer talks about the body having nikavim, chalulim, holes and channels. This and that which is open has to be open. That which is closed has to be closed. Clearly, Tfilat Asher Yatzar is talking about a woman giving birth. So yet again, the fixed words could be teaching us something so unique about what's happening right now to us in life.